Since the beginning of this day, 92 combat engagements have been recorded on the front line. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The most intense situation is in the Lyman, Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk directions. For more details on the situation at the front line, stay tuned.
Drones from the Security Service of Ukraine and Special Operations Forces struck the Feodosia marine oil terminal. At least 5 storage tanks were hit, according to Freedom's sources in the Security Service of Ukraine. As a result of the attack, a large fire broke out at the oil depot. A substation in Feodosia was also hit, with transformers and dispatch protective automation damaged. A series of explosions also occurred at the Simferopol substation. In addition, a strike was carried out on Hvardiske, from where the Russian army launches Shaheds at Ukraine. It is known that there are also warehouses with Russian drones located there.
Indeed, it was loud in Crimea today, and today the Feodosia landscapes are adorned almost. They say that in the entire eastern part of Crimea, the flames can be seen from 30 and in some places even 50 kilometers away. Everything is burning out. They say the base needs to be shut down. This is a recommendation for the occupying Crimean authorities, who have also confirmed that there will be no gasoline.
Meanwhile, on the front line, the Russian army does not stop trying to advance in the Donetsk region. In the Lyman direction, Russian occupiers suffered losses in equipment and personnel as a result of the nighttime operations by the pilots of the Signum battalion. Their strike drones destroyed several trucks, including a Kamaz and a Ural, as well as the UAZ minivan, popularly known among Russians as the Loaf. And in the southern Slobozhansky direction, aerial reconnaissance units from the Strix division of the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine struck the positions of the Russian army. Using FPV drones, they destroyed 2 communication antennas, 2 field ammunition depots, and a Russian drone. In addition, enemy infantry was hit. There, in the southern Slobozhansky direction, the defense forces repelled attempts by Russian invaders to break through the defenses near Vovchansk, Kamenka, and Kutkovka. The enemy also tried to advance toward Bologovka and Dvorichanske. In the Konstantinovka direction, Ukrainian defenders thwarted attempts by the Russian army to attack in the areas of Predtekino, Oleksandr Shultine, Shcherbinivka, Berestok, Rusin Yar, and Poltavka. In the Pokrovsk sector of the front, the enemy attempted assaults in the areas of Vladimirovka, Rodinske, Mirnohrad, Kotlin, Udakne, Pokrovsk, Zverev, and Novopavlivka.
Despite this, the command of the defense forces managed, in some directions, to form tactical level reserves and implement active defense and conduct counterattacks. This refers to Dobropilia. There was a known raid by Russian forces and they were split into 3 segments, 3 regions.
In the Kupiansk direction, operators from the Sapsan Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade used FPV drones to destroy a van and a quad bike belonging to the Russian occupiers. However, the enemy's logistical problems did not end there. The occupiers were left without communications as Ukrainian drones located and destroyed several of their antennas at once. And units of the 24th Separate Assault Battalion Adar, together with fighters from the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment, liberated several settlements in the Zaporizhzhia region at once. As a result of a successful operation, the Ukrainian Defense Forces regained control over Shicherbaki, Mali Shicherbaki, and partially Stepny. The Ukrainian flag is once again flying over them. Several Russian occupiers were also taken prisoner. At the same time, the units added that the operation is ongoing. In total, over the past day, the Ukrainian Defense Forces eliminated 1,140 Russian servicemen. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the total losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale aggression have exceeded 1,123,000 servicemen. In addition, over the past day, 3 Russian tanks, 21 artillery systems, 2 multiple launch rocket systems, and 110 units of enemy vehicles and special equipment were destroyed.
Starting today, NATO is launching its annual exercises aimed at strengthening the alliance's readiness for nuclear deterrence. They will take place in the Netherlands, as reported by NATO's press service. About 70 aircraft from 14 allied countries and 2,000 personnel will participate in the exercises. Dutch F-35 fighter jets will be involved, as well as reconnaissance aircraft, aerial refueling planes, and command and control aircraft from the Allies. Attack command and control aircraft from the Allies. As NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte noted, such measures send a clear signal to any potential adversary that the alliance is ready to defend itself.
It is important that such exercises are held annually. This is regular training, and we need to do this. After all, this is the only way we can guarantee that our nuclear deterrence capability remains as reliable, safe, and effective as possible. It also sends a clear signal to any potential adversary that we will be able to protect all allies from any threats. Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, from a statement on the alliance's website.
On October 17th, Volodymyr Zelensky will visit the United States and meet with President Donald Trump. The president of Ukraine announced this during a press conference with Sky and Kalos. The main topic of this visit is air defense and Ukraine's ability to carry out long-range strikes to put pressure on Russia, Zelensky said. A Ukrainian delegation has already departed for Washington, headed by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko, head of the presidential office Andriy Yermak, and Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council Rustem Umerov. And let me remind you, over the past weekend, President Zelensky had 2 phone conversations with Donald Trump. The leaders of the states discussed strengthening air defense as well as the sale of Tomahawk missiles. Slovenia has joined the program to purchase American weapons for Ukraine. This was announced by the country's Prime Minister Robert Golob during a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. What amount are we talking about? The information is classified, the politician noted, adding that Ljubljana's assistance to Kyiv will be focused solely on defensive weaponry. In particular, Golob mentioned an air defense system that will help protect Ukraine's energy facilities from Russian strikes. NATO and the European Union are working together to strengthen their military capabilities. 2 weeks ago, the presentation of the European Union's defense readiness roadmap through 2030 was announced. And now, on Wednesday, the defense ministers of the alliance countries and the European Union will gather in Brussels to coordinate their plans. On the eve of this meeting, a session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly was held in Ljubljana. There, the alliance leadership shared their plans. For now, the main investment by NATO countries in European security is supporting Ukraine. Our special correspondent was following this meeting, a correspondent for the Freedom TV channel in Europe. Let's watch.
Despite the fact that Ukraine is independently working to strengthen its air defense system, it still needs support from its allies to protect its skies. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke about this today, addressing the participants of the meeting via video link of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, which gathered in Ljubljana. The Ukrainian president reminded everyone about the initiative to purchase American weapons for Ukraine.
We have started producing interceptor drones to stop Shaheds, and we have mobile strike groups and aircraft. But Russian strikes are of a mixed nature. The enemy uses a variety of cruise and ballistic missiles, so systems like Patriot, NASAMS, SAMP-T and others are absolutely essential. We are negotiating with everyone who can help with air defense systems and missiles. Before winter sets in, Putin hopes to use this terror to break our resistance. We must not allow this to happen.
The Ukrainian president called not to ease sanctions against Russia, to stop buying its oil and to support the coalition of the willing. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also spoke positively about the initiative to purchase weapons in the US under NATO's auspices and announced further deliveries.
NATO has launched a new initiative to support Ukraine. The list of Ukraine's priority needs, or the PURL program. This involves purchasing with Allied funds the most essential lethal and non-lethal military equipment which only the US can provide to Ukraine. To date, equipment worth $2 billion has already been delivered in this way, which not only helps Ukraine continue to fight, but also saves lives. And that's just in the first 2 months of the PURL program. Other deliveries will follow soon.
The head of NATO stated that, according to his information, Russia is spending about 40% of its budget on the war and plans to produce 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles and hundreds of Iskander missiles just this year. China is also rapidly building up its military capabilities, including its nuclear arsenal. At the same time, Russia is conducting a covert campaign against NATO countries and trying to undermine support for Ukraine.
We should not underestimate the threat from Russia, but we also should not overestimate its capabilities. Despite their declared goals, the Russians have failed to achieve their plans, and at an incredible cost. More than 1 million of their soldiers have been killed or seriously wounded. In 2022, Russia believed it could crush Ukraine in a matter of days. In the 4th year of its brutal war, the Russian army is barely making any progress, and the Russian armed forces are stretched along the entire front line.
Mark Rutte spoke about the commitments of NATO members to invest 5% of their GDP in defense. He announced a meeting of alliance defense ministers this Wednesday to discuss the way forward. for further strengthening the overall deterrence and defense system, especially in light of Russia's recent aggressive actions. The ministers will discuss plans to achieve the new target for defense investment. On Wednesday, there will also be a meeting of the Ukraine NATO Council, as well as the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, better known as the Ramstein format. Traditionally, new aid packages are announced at such meetings. Russia's aggressive actions only lead to their increase. Vitaly Sizov, Ruslan Kuzgov from Brussels for Freedom TV channel.
Russia is likely helping North Korea develop submarines. According to South Korea's Ministry of Defense, Putin has transferred various technologies to Kim Jong-un. However, it is still too early to talk about successful tests of a ballistic missile launched from a submarine in North Korea. I would note that over the past 2 years, Moscow and Pyongyang have significantly strengthened their military cooperation. And according to Seoul's intelligence, the North Korean dictator has sent more than 10,000 soldiers to the war in Ukraine, in exchange for military and economic assistance from Russia. Putin is ready to keep testing Europe and could provoke a hot confrontation at any moment. This was stated by the president of Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, Martin Jäger. He told lawmakers in Berlin that Moscow's actions are aimed at undermining NATO's unity, destabilizing European democracies, dividing society, and intimidating the population. Jäger noted that the hybrid methods Russia uses for this are now seen everywhere, and the frequency of individual incidents reflects a new level of confrontation. The head of foreign intelligence added that restraint and leniency are interpreted by Russia as weakness, so Germany needs to draw the right conclusions from this. The group of 7 countries want to maximize pressure on Russian oil exports. The plan involves increasing production in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and reducing purchases of Russian oil by India and Turkey. This was reported by Reuters. This would be a serious blow. The Kremlin's already weakening economy could be further damaged, and it might even force Putin to end the war against Ukraine, according to the publication. To achieve this, it is necessary for other countries, especially the Gulf states, to increase oil production. It is also necessary to persuade major buyers of Russian raw materials, such as India, to purchase less Russian oil and more Saudi and Emirati oil. Russia's coal industry has plunged into the worst crisis in the past 30 years. According to the Financial Times, in just the first 7 months of this year, the sector's losses amounted to $2.8 billion. This is twice as much as for the entire previous year. The coal industry has become one of the main economic casualties of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Among the reasons for the miners' record losses are sanctions and, of course, the loss of the European market, rising costs and falling global coal prices. More than 24 Russian coal companies have already closed, and another 53 are on the verge of bankruptcy. I would like to note that the coal sector accounts for more than 140,000 jobs. And the region hit hardest by the crisis is Russia's coal region, Kuzbas. Energy, European sanctions, and Russia's frozen assets were the key topics discussed today by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the European Union's High Representative Kaja Kallas. The meeting took place in Kyiv as part of the EU foreign policy chief's visit to Ukraine. Freedom correspondent Yulia Granovskaya will provide more details on the main outcomes of this meeting.
Sanctions, a special tribunal for Russia, as well as strengthening Kyiv's defense capabilities, were discussed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. Volodymyr Zelensky expressed hope that despite the resistance of several European Union member states, the EU will still adopt it next week. The 19th package of sanctions against the aggressor country.
We have reviewed the 19th sanctions package and are counting on a positive decision. Sanctions are important as they are a powerful lever of pressure on Russia, and that is why we will immediately begin working on the 20th package. We also discussed the frozen Russian assets, and there has been progress here. We are expecting the finalization of the corresponding steps.
The defense of Ukraine is also the defense of Europe, which is why we are working on the next sanctions packages to help you with military needs. The Russian economy is already weakened, and we continue to weaken it with our sanctions so that Moscow will finally be unable to finance this war.
Long-range weapons, strengthening air defense, as well as energy security. Volodymyr Zelensky announced that he will meet with the President of the United States as early as this Friday. With Donald Trump, He will primarily discuss strengthening air defense, in particular the transfer of Patriot systems to Ukraine. After all, Putin will not stop targeting Ukraine's energy sector, Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized.
We are preparing for problems with the energy sector. It is possible that after 1 or 2 more Russian attacks, we will have to import electricity. We always use this option during the winter period. In addition, Russia is attacking our gas storage and gas infrastructure. That is why we have started talking about importing gas. We have estimates of our needs. The key issue is financing. Today, gas is not a problem. We know where we can purchase it. The main thing is that you need to have sufficient funds for this.
Kaja Kallas, in turn, confirmed the EU's full support for Ukraine and also reminded that this year the bloc is providing record military aid to Ukraine.
Ukraine, better than anyone, knows its own military needs. Whether we're talking about Patriots or Tomahawks, it is Ukraine that should say what it needs. For our part, we are trying to help meet these needs, which is why we are discussing various initiatives. As for frozen assets, Russia must pay for all the destruction it has caused in Ukraine. And it is Ukraine that should decide where these funds are directed.
Russia must be held accountable for its unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, which is why the European Union will continue to increase pressure on Moscow, depleting its war economy, as well as supporting Kyiv, because the defense of Ukraine is the defense of the European Union, emphasized Kaja Kallas.